How's it going?
Delightful, delightful. I feel like I got a little too excited about GraphQL and Grafbase.
No, GraphQL is awesome. I've been using it for many years now, and I still love it.
That is awesome. And I mean, just like diving right into our Q&A, what's the biggest benefit of choosing Grafbase?
I think with GraphBase, one of the things that allows developers to do really is forget about learning all of the different APIs and SDKs and having to kind of configure all of those and call all the different functions and add all of the different API routes and serverless functions. What you can do with GraphBase is you can just connect your sources directly. So whether that be another GraphQL API or even a REST API that has a open API specification, we can take that specification and transform it into GraphQL. And then on top of that, you get this, well, all of that outputs, say a single unified GraphQL API. But on top of that, you get things like auth, so you can customize different rules for different access groups and things and what they can access, what they can't access, things like that. All of this works locally as well. You can add GraphQL edge caching in there, and then you can deploy this. And yeah, we'll take all of your different data sources, put them at the edge closest to the user, and then when users make requests, it's hitting the closest kind of node to them at the edge, which is pretty cool. Not many people do it, which is cool.
Yeah, and I feel like you kind of started answering this, but for those of us who have don't know much about GraphQL or don't know anything about Grafbase, what are some similar services to Grafbase that, so that way we can familiarize ourselves with that to understand what sets Grafbase apart?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's two things that comes to mind. One, I'm sure we're all very familiar of a framework that we all used way back when, which was Gatsby.js, right? And Gatsby was really cool because it allowed people to plug in these different data sources, and you could kind of join them, and you had all of this different stuff working together in a single GraphQL API. But that was kind of only to read data, and it was it was a build tool, it was a local build tool. You couldn't really do anything with that. And what Grafbase does, it's kind of got that similar concept where you can bring all of those different sources and create a different API, but also you can you can mutate data as well. You can send GraphQL mutations to mutate data. So we kind of take that local experience, keep it local, but we'll also push that to an endpoint as well that your applications can interface with on the web. And also another tool which maybe people are familiar with is something called Hasura. And Hasura is a really cool tool. I've used this many times before in the past. And that's great because it allows you to kind of connect your database, create a GraphQL API. But when you want to deploy that, you have to set up your own containers, or you have to use the cloud offering. And then once you opt into the cloud offering, you then have these HTTP-based resolvers and validations, and it kind of adds latency, I guess. So what Grafbase will do is take your resolver code and your webhooks and all your different kind of custom logic, and we'll deploy that to the edge alongside that GraphQL. So that's how we differentiate that as well. So I'd say both of those services combined makes Grafbase.
I like it. I like it. All right. And do you have any case studies about those who are using Grafbase and how they benefited? I can talk today. How they benefited from using Grafbase?
Yeah, so we're still very early stages. We raised some funding last year, and we've kind of been building this idea for the last year and a half, I'd say. And we have a few kind of really cool customers at the moment that are using Grafbase as maybe as a white label, you could say. So they take what we have and they use our admin API, and they provide a service to their users that kind of creates a GraphQL API, deploys all of the custom code for their users, and they kind of have this multi-tenant setup, and they're using Grafbase to power all of that. So we just kind of, removed all of the need for them to kind of build all of this out from scratch, and we just kind of take care of that. And then the other is we've got a few users who use this for caching, especially around e-commerce. So they're able to kind of bring in their Shopify API and their content management system, and they're able to kind of join those together. So a product that's in Shopify can have lots of different data from their CMS, things like instruction manuals, reviews, detailed guides on using the product with photos and images. all of those can come from a DAM or from a CMS, wherever it be. Those kind of get merged together into one GraphQL API. And then a developer that's building the front end only has to worry about talking to one service instead of a dozen manually. So, yeah.
That's pretty rad. That is pretty rad. All right. Next question of how well would Grafbase fit into my CI/CD pipeline? And really quick, I just want to say it is really hard not to say like CIDC, because every single time I see this, I think of ACDC. It happens, but it's CICD pipeline.
Yeah, that's another great question as well. One of the things that Grafbase has always had from the beginning is support for branching. So if you deploy, say you push a new pull request, Grafbase will automatically deploy a new preview GraphQL API, and then you can use that with that specific branch. So if you have added a new feature and you open a pull request, we will deploy a new GraphQL API so you can add that to that branch environment variable wherever you have your front end stored or your mobile app, and you can use that kind of preview URL for the new GraphQL API, which is really cool. We've always supported that, and we'll continue to support that, and it kind of aligns up well with how everyone else does it, with these preview branches. And if you don't use GitHub, like we have login with GitHub, connect GitHub, and deploy to from GitHub, you can also use the CLI inside of a GitHub or a GitLab workflow. So you can use the CLI to push your schemas to Grafbase as well, which is cool.
Nice. And I feel like you kind of answered around some of these, but as like a direct question, does Grafbase generate REST APIs or only GraphQL APIs? And also for those, I feel like REST APIs are pretty popular. People get how REST APIs work. Adding to this question, could you kind of explain more of the differences between REST APIs and GraphQL APIs as well?
Yeah, for sure. So Grafbase currently provides a single GraphQL API, but there are tools to convert GraphQL APIs into RESTful APIs. And that's also an important point to make to answer kind of your second part of the question is GraphQL itself is just a specification. It doesn't mention the transport kind of layer at all. So this kind of way of working with data and querying data can be kind of implemented anywhere. It just so happens HTTP is the most popular one, right? So it gets, for many years, it went through this battle of, is it REST or is it GraphQL? And honestly, I think we're beyond that now. They both work over HTTP. GraphQL works just like sending a fetch request. It just so happens, you can think of it like inside of the GraphQL request, you are adding the endpoint that you want to retrieve in the post request, and it returns that data. And you can kind of specify what fields you want to do. Now, REST, on the other hand, typically with REST, you have all of these different endpoints. And I think myself included for many years got caught up on this GraphQL versus REST and really discussing endpoints and serverless endpoints and API routes as opposed to actual REST APIs. And REST APIs, again, follow a pattern, follow a specification. There's certain specifications within the REST space to kind of create APIs that follow a standard. So when you boil it down, they can be almost the same. It's just the specifications differ. But with REST APIs, it tends to be /users. We'll get you all users, posting to it will create, posting to users /1 with a put or a patch will do various things or delete. GraphQL, you tend to just adding the action and the behavior that you want inside of a query or a mutation. So I probably butchered that explanation, but honestly, this conversation, like I think in the community, we've kind of moved on from that. It's now, GraphQL is great for things. It's not great for some other things. And it's the same for REST as well. Just comes down to developer experience and what you prefer, I guess, at the end of the day.
I like that because I feel like it is something that it's all about experience, and something that I was saying on my show yesterday is it's about tribal knowledge too. Like if you have a ton of people around you that know GraphQL, then it's probably going to be a lot easier to use GraphQL than it is to learn RESTful APIs and understanding the differences. And same with yesterday, I learned about Nuxt, the dev tools on Nuxt, and I'm just like, dude, that's so cool. And now I'm like, now I just want to build everything in Nuxt, and I have to learn that. But that does bring us to our next question of, do you have any Graph-base with Vue.js tutorials that you would suggest?
I think we have a guide that we have, or we have an example. We have a GitHub repo that has tons of different templates with all of the different data sources, and obviously all of those work with Vue. And then we have an example in GitHub that uses Vue and Nuxt. And yeah, I think you could look at that, and if you're familiar with Vue, which I'm sure everyone here is, you could look at that and go, this isn't really that different to REST. It makes a fetch request and it gets me the data, and I can do what I want with it. As an official guide, I don't think there is anything, so it certainly would be a great opportunity for people if they want to get involved to create some content like that. We'd love it. But yeah, I'm relatively new to Vue, but I'd be happy to kind of create a guide if anyone wants to see it. But there's examples, and I'm sure everyone that knows Vue will pretty quickly understand how easy it is to use Graph-base with it.
For sure. And I don't know of any Graph-base specific ones as well, but there is a Learn GraphQL one with Vue School. I posted that one, and then Anna posted in the chat as well about joining the Graph-base Discord. So y'all definitely check that one out. All right. Next up on our all of our Graph-base questions. What other services besides the database are included?
So the biggest thing for Graph-base is the Edge gateway, and that allows you to kind of connect all of these different services. So we provide a very lightweight database, but if you're looking for something that's like MySQL or Postgres that has all of that, breadth of different features and functionalities, Graph-base will not give you that. We have a very lightweight database that is similar to KV with kind of more of some kind of, you could say, constraints and validations and schema around it. But we will soon provide a native connector for MongoDB and some other things as well. So yes, the gateway you get, that's just what Graph-base fundamentally is. You get the auth service on top, so you can bring in any of your different auth providers, whether that be Clerk, /ID, Auth0, whatever you're using, you can use that auth provider to sign JWTs, and then you can use that JWT with Graph-base, and we'll talk to that other provider and go, is this token allowed, etc. All of this works locally with the CLI. We have that branching support that I talked about. We have edge caching, which is pretty cool. So you can cache any API, and that could be a GraphQL API, that could be a REST API. We will provide you a GraphQL API automatically. We'll convert REST to GraphQL. And with Mongo, we'll do that as well. So you'll be able to kind of add caching on top of your MongoDB without having to hit their APIs, which is pretty cool. So I'd say in a nutshell, that's Graph-base.
If you guys are expanding beyond Mongo, like hit up Ivan, let me know. Like happy to do some introductions. Like that would be dope.
Yeah.
All right. And this is our last question of what are the future plans for Graph-base?
Right now, we are very committed to creating a lot of different connectors and working closely with those people who want to unify different APIs and just kind of make the experience better and create, have faster performing websites and mobile apps. We really want to spend a bunch of time with mobile developers as well to create this kind of single unified API. There's been a huge transition in the community, I think, towards server-rendered apps. And I know Nuxt has support for this and API routes. And, we've kind of moved on to creating all these different endpoints. But I think we're in a bit of a transition. So I think Graph-base's future is really to try and unify all of those endpoints we ended up creating and all the different services. Like we have services for everything now, and we just want to bring those together into a single API and allow people to extend those and deploy those. But yeah, connect with more databases. Yeah, like that's what we're focused on. We're not trying to do too much.
Very
right now.
cool. Very cool. Well, thank you, Jamie, for joining today, and we will see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.